Every single thing doesn't need to be created manually and with this high quality standard that I think people think of. I moved to a quantity play in many areas of content.
Welcome back to Content in the Kitchen, where we gather around the kitchen and chat about content marketing. Today, I'm thrilled to have Jakub Rudnik, the head of content and SEO at Softr, join us for a conversation that every content marketer really needs to hear. Jakub's journey from journalism to leading content teams at companies like ActiveCampaign, Scribe, and G2 gives him a really unique perspective on one of the most debated topics in our industry. Do you do quantity or do you focus on quality in content creation? As someone who's not just a marketer, but also a journalist by trade and a teacher at DePaul University, Jakub knows the power of storytelling and the impact of well-crafted content. In this episode, we're going to dive deep into the balancing act between producing tons of content and maintaining top-tier quality. So grab your favorite cup and let's dive into the conversation with Jakub. So to really just kick things off with a bit of a fun conversation, when you're not working on content and SEO, what is your go-to dish to cook in the kitchen?
I love that question. So definitely love cooking just across the board. So I love being on the grill. I love being in the kitchen, dishes of all sorts, and really trying a lot of things. I think my go-to would definitely be something on the grill or maybe even the smoker, especially when entertaining. I really like smoking and smoking ribs. I think that would be one of the things that I really like to go to do a couple times each summer.
So have you mastered like the perfect ribs? Because whenever I'm smoking ribs, they're either amazing or it just didn't come out and I don't ever understand why.
I feel like I've got the timing down. And so the perfect ribs I keep evolving on. I've tried some different rubs or sauces and things. So that changes. Each time I do it a little bit, I would keep experimenting. But the timing I think I've got in the smoker, the 225, whether it's the 3-2-1 method or sometimes even doing a little bit shorter, but really keeping the liquid high to keep the moisture there. I think those have been the two ways that work for me. But I feel pretty good that I haven't had a bad rib personally in a long time. Pat myself on the back, definitely knock on wood because it'll happen soon enough.
Yeah, definitely. That's very impressive. Ribs are hard to cook, but so is SEOs. So you have a background in journalism. I also have a background in journalism, and I love how there's so many journalists that are in content and SEO and just like really dove into this field. Can you share how you made that transition and how journalism really influences your approach to content and SEO?
Yeah, it happened honestly by accident-ish. So I was working in sports TV basically for an online station. And so working 4 p.m. to 1 a.m. My days off Monday and Tuesday, I didn't make very much money. And so really being in my like mid-ish 20s was like looking for a change. So a lot of my social life was gone, wasn't saving any money, all that type of stuff. And I thought I'd make a pivot for maybe a couple years, just get a change of pace and then go back to journalism. And I happened to just was applying to content jobs because the skills were very similar, as many people do, and just happened to fall into G2 Crowd, which was 30 people at the time. It's now G2.com, but got really lucky that I found a company that was out in the suburbs of Chicago, hadn't hired as many people. So I think that they were more open to people with different backgrounds, and then got on to an awesome ride where this company went from 30 to 450. I upskilled and changed positions, honestly, every 6 to 12 months for 5 years straight. And so it was a thing where, did I know a little bit about SEO and content before? Yes, but very little. And so it was really growing in the job and knowing the company was a big part of that. So got really lucky that the company was right and they helped me to grow in that role while I was there.
And so you basically, from role to role, got to know a little bit more about the industry and get a little bit more technical with it? Or did you stay on a creative level the whole way?
Yeah, so it was a little bit of both. And so again, in the first year or two, I'm still thinking I'm going to move back to journalism full time. I'm doing some stuff for the Tribune freelance wise, writing 3, 4, 5 articles a week on top of my full-time job and just doing too many things. But at that point, I'm still trying to keep one foot in both camps. And so to me, content was more on the storytelling, creative. I'm certainly doing more business type of stuff as needed, but I wasn't thinking about the business metrics. I didn't know software and SaaS in general. G2 is an awesome head start for that because you just have to learn that environment horizontally. Sometime in that year 2 range, I was picking up things and getting more interested. When you hit some of these goals, you get excited, like, I did this and it moved this needle, starting to make some connections. And then there was a vacuum where a director of research left, our SEO person left, our numbers had flatlined. And so there was a vacuum for a couple of us to step into, and got challenged by a couple of the founders. We need to fill this in. Are you open to taking on this? And so it was really like a 6-month, just a marathon of long days, self-learning, experimenting. And that was like my going from that creative side over to the more technical and really absorbing everything, creating. And then from there, I really focused on the careers and the skills and went from there. But it was very open-ended, where the job changes early were more in that creative sphere, and then they turned more technical and more data-driven, and then team-driven as the team grew.
I feel like that's a really natural progression, though, because especially going from journalism, you have such a creative hat, and so you're drawn to that kind of work. But then as you progress within content marketing, you have to learn the tech side of things. You have to learn how to optimize things. You have to learn how SEO works. And with all the updates, like, you have to eventually evolve into that. I don't know many content marketers who are just creating content and have no knowledge or depth of experience of SEO. Especially these days, they have to go hand in hand.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I have seen folks just coming from journalism or creative writing or something like that do want to stay more on I'm telling a story, or I'm doing this. And I've seen that. And I do think that for me, letting go of some of that and understanding more of the why to the content and how it really applied to this was like one of the lessons I either tell my current students or I tell people on podcasts and things like this, is really like the learning what your boss cares about and then their boss cares about and so on. Like that's where both like me having more of an impact and understanding the why, but also then the career progression opens up when you understand those things and how to move the needle on that. And for me, that was the kind of career shift, was not just what makes one piece of content good or one story good, but how does that apply to the larger department or beyond. Agreed. I think you need to do that. I think some people resist that early on. You go to J school or creative writing school, you just want to tell beautiful stories, but that often isn't enough in this space.
Yeah, I can't just write poems or creative writing stories anymore like I used to many years ago. And I still hope to be a National Geographic journalist one day. Like, I still hold on to that. But here we are talking about content marketing. So you mentioned when we were chatting back and forth before this podcast about your takes on content and whatnot, and you mentioned quality versus quantity and your perspective of it. So I really want to dive into that, because at the very beginning of the whole web boom, it was produce tons of content. It doesn't even matter what you're saying. You just need to have so much content. And then it switched to, okay, now narrow in on what kind of content that you're creating. And it needs to be really long form pieces of content. And it's changed about 1,000 times since. So where are we at today, and what's your perspective on quality versus quantity?
Yeah, I think that's a nice segue from the journalism experience, because coming out of J school, I think I'm a really strong copy editor. I think I've got a good eye for visuals and how they apply, and those things do matter, no doubt about it. But I think one of the unlocks for me career-wise was knowing some of the things that can be let go of, and what matters. Like, early when I was a research editor, or maybe like position number 2 or 3 at G2, like I've gotten a promotion, I'm like leading an intern, that type of thing. We spent a ton of time creating like this big, long 20-page style guide for the research team that ultimately nobody used. Ultimately, our readers didn't really care if e-commerce was hyphenated or the E was capitalized. Like, as long as it was consistent. And honestly, even then, how often do they notice? These are things that I think matter on the very periphery. But some of that stuff that we took so much time on didn't really move a needle. We spent a whole sprint or 2 on that to not see any business results. And so I've seen that in a couple of different areas. Like for us at G2, we were spending a lot of time getting custom images on these organic driven blog posts that we didn't see an uptick at all after we spent the money and the time getting all of these designed, versus just using stock images. Like, I hate using stock images. I don't think it's the best experience, but we weren't seeing any metric change for the budget and the time. And so there's a lot of things like this where it seems like cutting corners, or at least like former me would have thought of them as cutting corners, but now I think of it more as like efficiency and focusing where it matters. There's certainly some types of content that need to be over polished and perfect. That white paper that you're going to publish once and is it downloadable, the research reports, something like that. But a lot of content, like I found so when I was at Scribe a couple companies ago, it's like a Chrome extension that takes something you're doing and turns into a step-by-step guides and grabs screenshots. And it was really just like a tool that the second someone heard about it, whoa, I wish this existed last time I needed to build SOPs or something. So they just go and try it out. Doesn't matter like what content you're showing them as long as you're telling them that this awesome thing exists. And we had this TikTok video that someone recorded with their screen, like with their camera of the screen. It's terrible quality that I would put like that word quality. It was ugly. The video editor and me would have hated it, but it was seen 1.6 million times. It told the right story, exactly how it was supposed to do. And it drove tons and tons of signups and revenue for Scribe. So was that high quality? No. In the definition I would have had 5 years ago, but was it optimized for that platform? Did it get in front of the right people and did it do its job? Yes. So that's where I have a different view of it. I'm also on the side of, with some types of content, you want just shots on goal. A lot of people do programmatic, whether it's templates or certain landing pages and things. And this is something I wouldn't have done in the past, but creating a lot of pieces where there's low competition, or you're really finding like niche audiences looking for specific things. Like these are opportunities where maybe every single thing doesn't need to be created manually and with this high quality standard that I think people think of. I moved to a quantity play in many areas of content, not in all things, but my blog posts, I want to create faster. Landing pages, especially this like kind of programmatic, I want to create much faster. I think a lot of people have gone because of AI. I understand it to more of like quality, fewer pieces. And I'll do that in certain pillars, but there's other areas where I don't think that's correct. I think you actually need to have a quantity play because your competition is doing that with AI. And so you need to find ways to keep quality fairly high while going and spreading as wide as possible.
So how do you factor in the risk of choosing when to do something quality versus quantity? Like the example you gave with Scribe, which huge fan of Scribe. We use it at ContentYum and totally love the tool. But that one video that was, I don't know, UX generated, like it was humanly generated and very clearly not a lot of resources put behind. I could easily see a marketing team reimagining that and thinking, okay, we need this kind of lighting in the background, we need full production, and doing the same exact concept. So how do you manage the risk when you're choosing an idea if you're going to go with the let's just get this out versus let's really dive into this?
Yeah, luckily for me, I've been at a bunch of early stage companies. And so when you're resource strapped and you're looking for traction anywhere, there's always somebody that's a little bit hesitant to do something that's not fully baked or experiment. But I've been at places where we've had more freedom to do this. For Scribe, it was like we weren't growing at the rate we wanted. What can we do? What will potentially have the biggest outcome? We didn't expect 1.4, 1.6 million views or whatever it was. But we were hoping maybe for 20,000 views because there was nothing else we were doing that was getting 20,000 views. So you can see on other B2B platforms or videos that looked like they could fit with Scribe, you could see something with 20,000 views. Let's take a shot before we invest and go get a production company to do all this. Can we recreate that success for Scribe? And so it's really about being scrappy and trying a V1. What does it look like? How do we even get this published? I think it was something like the third or fourth we'd ever published. And so it was really like, how can we test this channel this week? Don't put money behind this. Just go and get it out the door and see what happens. So I think there's places where you can be experimental like that. TikTok was one of those for us. I think with where I'm at Softr right now, some of these like long tail landing pages, like we have a good landing page. Can I recreate a very similar version with a much smaller keyword where there's not a ton of risk? I think it's that risk versus reward. So I'm looking for a place where something either won't be very visible or we have no traction at all right now. Like what's the real downside? If the video is a little low quality, the messaging was still right, we're still getting there. Odds were that the TikTok video was never going to go viral. It did, but the worst case is 100 people see it, it's not that good, and we just delete it and move on.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really that versus, again, if you're going to put an entire quarter's marketing campaign behind that like research paper or whatever it is, like you can't cut those corners there. So really, I'm just weighing that and trying to be as experimental as possible in the early stages before we ramp up all those resources.
That makes a lot of sense and feels a lot safer especially being like on a platform that maybe you don't have a ton of reach yet, but enough to where you can get enough data to be like, yeah, this is effective, or no, this didn't work. Let's strap it and actually put some proper resources behind it. Landing pages are interesting though, because you can definitely argue that, hey, this is representing the brand and this is more like very conversion focused and going to be a lot more text heavy. And it's coming at an angle that isn't as creative as something like a social video. So for your landing pages, do you have a specific formula of when you're mass creating them? Do they all have the same design layout and you're just swapping out copy, or?
Yeah, it's more like that. So that's the same thing where I think getting the first one really in place, getting like a really great landing page that you believe in, that you've tested and things, and then basically like dragging the spreadsheet with the copy and changing certainly the text and certainly visuals as well. And that's where you need that it's not a V1, but you need like that great example that is tested, and then you've done the keyword research on these other ones to go drag that. And I think the other piece, like with display and some others too, is can that piece of content be changed later? So this is where like with blog posts, I think I'm more free with cutting some corners and going faster than some other heads of content, because like those, when I hit publish, like nobody sees it. This is like the journalist in me was like, you publish it, it's on the internet, anyone can see. And I think a lot of non-marketers feel that way, like a CEO going to your blog and asking why something's like it is. Well, no one's read that. It just got published. No one's going to read it for months potentially, or not many. So there's very little risk there. So in those cases, or the landing pages, like we can wait for Google or our users to send us signals. And when we're getting more traffic or more impressions or something, we can optimize, make sure that something's really polished. And so for me, if, for instance, we publish 200 landing pages in one day, which I would never have done 5 years ago, but now is like something I'm doing or thinking about. Not all 200 of those will work, but because I'm shooting a lot of shots on goal, I can go find the 20 that are really working well, make sure that those are tested and optimized while the other ones fall flat. And if I'm only publishing 20 really polished, I still won't hit all 20 of those. I'll probably still only hit 5 or 8 of those. So I just want my shots on goal. And I think I can optimize later for something like a landing page or a blog. But again, can't do that with your white paper.
Yeah. Get the fear of publishing something and being like, 1,000 people are going to see this immediately. And then you look at your analytics and it's 4 page views over a week. Okay. People are really so focused on it like we are. But when it comes to metrics and really analyzing the success from blog posts to landing pages to social, it's going to be totally different. And you're collecting data to really identify if this quantity play was the way to go or not. But is there one metric kind of like across the board, regardless of content type, that you first want to look at when you're producing new pieces of content?
Yeah, so for me, and mostly on your own website, so content, blogs, landing pages, et cetera, that's where I focus. And for me, it's like a funnel of metrics almost. Like on day 1 and 2, did this even get indexed? I'm just checking that and making sure that's happening and forcing that through Search Console if it's not. But that's my very basics, especially coming into a new company and site. Is that healthy? And then I'm watching, it's like impressions and keywords and Ahrefs or SEMrush. But is Google even exploring putting us into a search? And so that's a good signal for me. Just like we said, nothing's going to happen on day 1, but in week 1, are we getting new keywords? In month 1, are we getting new? And are those the right keywords? And ultimately over the following months, are those growing? Like we're doing this right now at Softr. I've only been there 6 or 7 months. So those first quarter's worth of content went from indexed, yes, to keywords, yes, and then the keywords kept expanding or jumping, and now we're seeing traffic, and that's like our next stage. Is someone actually coming to the page? Certainly there's some stuff you can look at there. Are they on the page? What are they doing on those pages? How are they interacting? But then from there, when we have traffic, is it for us someone signing up for a free plan? And then down the road, are they signing up for a paid? So there's like metrics to all of those. Really, I want those like first pieces. Are we finding ourselves in search, in queries at all? That's our impression, right? Or our keyword. And then the next one is that traffic. And from there, I don't know, you'll see this on LinkedIn all the time that like traffic for traffic's sake, whatever. But as long as I've identified the right keyword, it's something that people would potentially use Softr or Scribe or whoever for, whatever your company is. If it's the right keyword, then as long as I have traffic, I can go optimize. I can take what people are doing on the page and adjust my content. So I just want to get to page 1 and then up those rankings. And I do as well as I can ahead of time, but I will never know how someone's going to interact until they're on the page. So I just want those pages out, get that traffic. And then we always are optimizing from there.
Yeah, you really can only do so much competitive research on what's happening as of that day when you publish and what's on page one. But that can change drastically in 3 months when the post finally really takes off and you're getting a lot of traffic. You mentioned something that's like hugely important. And I think a lot of people miss the step, or they hope the SEO team, or they put on the SEO hat and maybe aren't so much of an SEO, but checking to make sure that it's even indexed in the first place and make sure that it's being found. Can you walk through like the very basic step of how you even do that? Because that's huge right there.
Yeah, in our Notion database, one of my first columns is just a simple yes or no. Is this indexed? And when your website's healthy, this should happen pretty naturally. But even now, I still have one piece I cannot get to index, and I don't know why. So I'm still working through this. My typical playbook is just I hit publish, and I'll even grab the URL and go to Search Console and manually submit that to Search Console for indexing. Typically, you don't have to do that. I'm sure some people will frown upon doing that unless it's actually like an existing page and you're changing it. But I've never had a penalty against that or anything. So you could just wait as long as your URLs are being submitted to your site indexes. Naturally, that will happen on its own, probably just a couple days delayed. But again, I'm going to Search Console. I'm pasting the new URL in that top search bar. And then there's I forget what it's called, but index request, I believe, is the button right on that page. The page will come up. It'll say it's not indexed. All the text will be gray. You just submit that. And then, especially when I'm in my early stages, when I'm not sure or stuff isn't indexing very quickly, I'll just check those pages every couple of days, like the things that have been submitted, and see if they're submitting to Google and indexing appropriately. Once you've done this a couple times, like literally just a couple pages, Google tends to do this either very quickly. You'll see things indexed within 24 to 48 hours. So really straightforward, but it's something that I wasn't doing at G2 early, and we were finding pages that hadn't indexed for weeks sometimes.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it's just something that obviously you want to get things indexing and ranking as quickly as possible. And you just never know. So that's one of my first checks, even if it seems pretty basic.
Yeah, it's basic, but it's so foundational. Going back into the quantity versus quality. So now we're in AI and people are just like, we're back to mass producing tons of content. Then we have helpful content update. Then we have March core update. And now we're at this weird space of, yes, produce a ton of content, but make sure it's the best content you've ever done and it's super helpful. And make sure there's 5 other pillar pieces to support it at some point in the user journey. Where does AI fit into your workflow with all of this? Or are you not using AI for any of your workflows?
No, AI is definitely fitting in. I think like if I'm looking at these landing pages, we're putting FAQ on there. And so luckily my boss is automation and AI heavy and like very useful and collaborative. And she's developed a GPT that's like been very trained to be in Softr's voice and be very helpful and like less repetitive. And so
Nice.
An example that we're testing is, can we create these FAQs that are going to be repetitive and are just fairly straightforward, a couple of short sentences that should just be really definition based. So that I feel is a good use case for AI. Can we set up an automation that every landing page we're creating has FAQs automatically generated through this custom GPT? So that's one version where the average part of the landing page is either done like programmatically, or there are manual parts of each landing page that we're creating. So we have distinct copy for that use case. But there's some sections of that landing page that are less important, but we still want that content on there, both for the user and how they'll use Softr, but also I think for some SEO value, the what is or examples or whatever, that type of stuff that people fill in that they don't love, but I think you have to put in there, or it can be an advantage on the margin. So we're creating it there. Other things are like definitely using it in outlining, or especially in just ideation in general. Sometimes I'm asking it like, for examples of who would use something or features or problems. And so we'll get a lot of that research from users, and we have big like databases of those things. But sometimes you just don't have, like, you need something else, or it's a new use case. So I'll use it just to get some traction, get some ideas and hear that out. So it's really like first versions of things for me, or using it in content that is repetitive, that doesn't need a human writer that like exists already. It's very definition and factual. And as long as the AI is correct, we can tweak to make the language a little bit more natural.
Yeah, you just have the copy editing aspect of it, which really is just making sure that this is brand correct and also factually correct. But you have the GPT to really understand the brand tone and style. So it skips a lot of those initial steps of retraining it. So it sounds like you're mainly
definitely.
using it for processes and then initial content every once in a while for FAQs.
Yeah, FAQs and some other sections get the lower stake. If you take a 1,500 word article, I think that there's 300 to 600 words are way more important than the rest. There's like the setting the stage. There's some of the examples or the extra questions we want to answer. That stuff does matter, but it's really like we need one version of that. The stuff that's really about positioning your product, the depth there, that's what I want to be on, or I want our product marketer on, and then I'm overseeing like that optimization. But that's the stuff that I would never have AI touch. But the other stuff that's a little bit more generic that most blogs have, I still want to reduce that, but I think there's some necessity to it, and AI can support you on the B1 there.
Yeah, I think that alone is a huge takeaway, is how much AI can support you. It's still your journey, it's still your task load, and it's still your content creation, but AI has been such a great support system to help you get to that finish line.
Yeah, definitely. I like that.
As we wrap up, I would love to know what your current secret sauce is, that one strategy, tool, or maybe even a recent book that you read that's really been a game changer when you're balancing quantity versus quality.
Yeah, that's a great question. I was big into like content, books, and podcasts. Honestly, I've taken a lot of this year off. I had a kid this year. I've been like trying to read more like novels and things and get out of content in some ways. And just, I think that's been helpful. Is I did so much for 4 or 5 years. Like it was all content, all SEO. And so now stepping away has let me have some space and prioritize. So that doesn't help answer your question, but I think it has helped me in some ways, is like freeing up. And so I don't have a resource I would recommend necessarily right now. We talked offline. I spent 2 weeks in Europe, and it was with the Softr team at an offsite and then working together. And that was really helpful, just having some time. But then over the last couple of weeks, I've had time in airports, I've had time walking around on my own and taking out my headphones, letting my brain wander rather than just listening to an audiobook or a podcast. I've had some of my best ideas and most impactful things there, is like carving out real time to digest, to think through. I think I've been missing that for a few months. So there's probably other people like that, like me, who are like content junkies. It feel like if you don't have your headphones in or you're not reading something, you're wasting your time in your life. And honestly, taking just 30 minutes here and there twice a day or whatever, that maybe that isn't even possible, but even just a little bit of time, it's like really opened up and freed my brain a little bit over the last month. So I would say that's my like current secret sauce. And hopefully that's not a cop-out answer.
No, I think that's a really good answer, because it brings you back to reality. We're so just so invested with do this, do that, how to do this, how to become this, and how to get to the top of this. And it's constantly being thrown at our face that we're like, yeah, okay, we should listen to this podcast, or we should listen to this new audiobook, and then start another book on top of that and subscribe to all these email newsletters. And in reality, we don't actually have time to digest all the information that we're trying to like load into our brain. So to be able to have those quiet times, I'm sure some of those thoughts that have been circulating are things that you may have learned 3, 6, or even 12 months ago that are coming through now. And you can actually digest that info and be like, oh, light bulb moment. Here we go.
Yeah, 100%. I think the shower thoughts idea is very real. And make sure you've carved out that time for that. I feel like I somehow missed that, or missed a lot of that. Didn't have it like I used to. So if you're like me, just take that minute, like pause each day. And I think it will open up some doors for you.
I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much for everything that you shared today. Really appreciate having you on the show.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Ashley. Thanks for having me.